All right. So to give an example of how the activity we're going to do for workshop 3 will work, I have mocked up this poster, and you will actually have this in a big trifold poster board, which is the same kind of poster that they'll be putting their science fair projects on, presumably. So there's a worksheet. You can see the worksheet linked in the website. And then you're going to use this board actually once they've completed the activity to bring all the data together. So this activity is a die rolling activity. You're going to give them two-sided dice, and you can do this in as many groups as you like. Two six-sided dice, different colors. They'll be prepared for you that way. And basically what they're going to do is they're going to roll those dice 10 times and record what happens. But before they do that, they have some provocation questions, like how many different combinations of numbers can you get with two six-sided dice? Are there some combinations of numbers that you can get different multiple ways and some that you can't, just to get them thinking about that numbers like 2 you can only get by rolling 1 and 1, but 7 you can get by rolling 3 and 4, you can get by rolling 2 and 5, you can get by rolling 1 and 6. So that might affect our outcomes when we roll like this. So each group's going to have their worksheet. They have a few questions they have to answer, a prediction they have to make about how they think the data will come out. Then they roll the dice and they can do a little graph on their own of what they got. So they're going to record what they got for each die, and that's why we have the dice being two different colors. So all in one column they'll record the results of die green die, and the other column red die, or whatever colors their particular dice are. And then do a little chart. Now, with their 10 rolls is not going to be terribly revealing of the data because they have 12 possible options. So it's probably going to be a pretty flat graph for them. But then what you're going to do once everybody's had a chance to do their 10 rolls is you're actually going to take that data and collect it up together at the front. And so you're going to have this big poster that you see in front of you, and you're going to have the chart here in the center that you see to graph it all together. This here on the side is just a reminder of variables, thinking about your variables, because I needed to fill some space on the poster. And this over here is actually going to be covered. The types of charts you see over here on the right, we're actually going to cover those with some little pieces of paper, and you can talk about after you do the summation. So you prop this board up at the front of the classroom, and then you have each group report. Okay, what sums how many 2s did you get? How many 3s? And this is, they have summed their dice. How many of each sum did you get? And you're gonna we're gonna use Post-its to mark the level for each graph. So this would be a pretty big poster for each sum. And then once all the groups have reported out, you should see a nice histogram like this histogram chart here over on the side. And then talk with them a little bit about what did they predict. Does that look like what they expected? It does. Does it not? Why do they think it might be different from what they expected? What do they think would happen if we rolled the dice even more? So presumably you'll have probably 10 to 15 reports if they do this in pairs. If you have each student do it, that would be a really great data, but our chart might not actually hold that, because I've only got 20 occurrences of each. So you probably want them to have them do it in groups of 2 or 3, just because it would take a long time for them all to report out. You could also have them come up to the front of the room and move the Post-it up if you trust them, which would be kind of fun. Actually, I encourage you to do that, but it takes a little bit more time if you do it that way. So you should get that nice normal curve, talk about what they expected and what they got. You don't need to go deep into statistics of this. This is just to get them to think about graphing and charting. And then so once you have collected all the data and you'll have your nice little histogram hump here in the middle, then you could talk about some different kinds of charts you can use. And these charts over here on the side, this histogram, pie chart, and bar chart, and scatter chart, were all generated using data from random die rolls, doing exactly the same things your student did. So there were, I had 100 random die rolls calculated in an Excel spreadsheet and then summed, and then I used it to make these different charts. So this first one should look very much like the chart that they made here in the center, although I had a weirdness. My 8s, there were surprisingly low 8s and extra high 9s over what you would expect over a lot of die rolls, which shows you that even 100 die rolls is a pretty small amount. If you did 1,000 or more, you'd have a very nice smooth normal curve. So talk about the difference between this one, explain to them we did this, we used a spreadsheet to generate 100 die rolls and this is what we got. So the histogram is a really nice way to represent it because it shows us how when we're rolling dice we have a higher probability of getting certain sums. Now we have the same probability if we're rolling one die of getting 1 through 6. It's all the same. That chart would be flat. But because we're adding them together and we have multiple ways of getting numbers like 6, 7, and 8, we get this peak in the center. You can actually write out on the board the different ways you can get each number if you want, but they probably will have done that on their worksheet. Then I also made a pie chart. Each one of these wedges represents one of those numbers, one of those sums. I don't have them on here because it didn't look very nice in the printout, but basically the biggest sections are 6, 7, and 9. And 8, and tapering off down to the sides. So a pie chart is one way we could represent this data. It's not particularly good for this kind of data. It might be a really good chart for other kinds of data, like how many people in the classroom have brown eyes versus blue eyes versus green eyes versus hazel. That would be a pretty clean pie chart. And a nice representation. Down on the third one here is a bar chart, and this is also from this data. The difference on this one is I actually took the different possible combinations and put them out there. So that line on the left is 2, which is done by 1 and 1, but then there's a hole because that's for 3 gotten by 1 and 2, and then there's also 3 as gotten by 2 and 1. So in that case, I made the order of the die consequential, so there were many more options. And this chart is much flatter. Well, it's kind of funky, but if you were to do this enough, this chart would be perfectly flat. Basically, not our nice hump over here. The data is much more noisy, but generally, if you were to draw a trend line across here, it'd be a pretty flat line, whereas here we'd want to draw a curve. So a bar chart, this is supposed to show how, depending on what we do with our data, it can look very different especially in terms of probability. There are different kinds of bar charts, histogram versus a traditional bar chart. And then down here's a scatter chart where X is the first die rolled and Y is the second die rolled, and we just get this big grid. It's pretty useless here. But if you were charting something like comparing someone's foot size versus their height, you'd get a nice trend line here because generally speaking, height and foot size are correlated. So this is just to get them thinking about how to take down data and what the best ways to represent their particular data might be. And it might not be a chart, it might just be a table for their data. That's the activity. It's pretty simple. And the presentation beforehand was pretty short, so you should be able to spend the rest of this session actually working with them on their research questions and their designs. Hopefully they've settled on a research question at this point, and you can focus in on having them write up their research plan, how they're going to go about doing it, and go around and help them and answer their questions and point out some areas where they might have problems or that they can, beef up their research design. All right, that's workshop 3. Thank you so much, and I'll be seeing y'all.